What up, y'all? Week 18 is here. I know there's not many of you that are playing, but for those of you that are playing, this week is for you, folks. But for those of the season's over, hello, champions. If you're a champion, congrats to you. I know SC won a couple leagues. I won some myself. We are living the good life. How are you doing today, SC? Are you looking forward to 2025 already?
Yeah, man, good one. I did win a couple leagues, but as my hashtag said, my wife is better than me. She won our home league. She is the back-to-back champ, actually. So my wife's out here killing
Ooh,
it in this redraft league. I play a lot of dynasty, so these redraft ones, I leave that up to her. So we'll probably have to get her on the show to talk about her strategy and how she does it because
right.
she starts some players, and I'm just like, I don't know if you do it, but it works out. So she does her own
Mm-hmm.
research and gets it going. But yeah, man, 2025. Bigger, better, more improved, right? For us, we had a lot of growth this season with the fantasy football universe. Thank you to everyone joining in and watching, and we're gonna continue to build that growth and just go from there. So, I mean, cheers to a wonderful 2024 season. Great fantasy football. We had injuries, we had trades, we had waiver wires, we had it all, and the 2025 we can't wait to get started.
Yeah, we'll see how this next year goes. This first year was us, building it up from the ground in January. Oh, we're basically a year out. Like this creeping to January. I don't know the first day we started. It was around a couple weeks from this point last year. So yeah, it's been a fun learning curve for us starting this off, building it up along with keeping up the leagues that we normally do. So overall, it was like a lot of good things. There were some bad things, but overall, anytime you try something new like we're doing, you're gonna make mistakes along the way. But as long as we make upward growth positively, like that's what we're going for. So
Right.
I'm not sure how many viewers we have on this show because it's week 18, so it is kind of
Right.
chaotic. But we figured, hey, we're here. We might as well at least do some waiver wire content, talk about the things that we did good on, the things that we did bad on, and stuff that in between. Where we may have made the wrong call, but it turned out positively because that's fantasy football sometimes, right? Case in point, Isaac Guerrero is basically just carrying people to championships down the stretch, even though
Right.
he didn't play at all. It's like there's players like that, right? So there's things of that nature where it might not always work out for you, but sometimes it does. So, what do you want to cover first? You want to kind of do the season recap, or you want to talk about these waivers for a second, and then we get into that?
Let's get into some of these waivers first, just because week 18. If you're in those, best of luck because it gets crazy.
Yeah,
Because some teams that are in, they sit their best players, so you have to really pivot. And if you're in Dynasty Week 18 championships, it makes it harder because it's like, all right, maybe there. I don't think Saquon Barkley's going to sit, but maybe they end up sitting him, and
yes.
now you're like, shit, who do I drop to get a replacement to win my championship, right? So in redraft, it's a lot easier, but in dynasties, it becomes all right, you gotta really be strategizing here to win these Week 18 championships.
Well, yeah, especially if you have no trade deadline, or if you do have a trade deadline, you can't trade for players. Particularly, like my ideal thought process is more I think about these play fantasy football playoffs is like doing more round robin style, you know, leagues and stuff of the nature. Obviously, in the championships, you too, but like throughout the playoffs, the teams who play the best performing and winning because if you play the best, you should deserve to go. But I know not everyone is for that because the head to head diehards are always going to have a big section of redraft, right? So that's kind of that. But
Right.
yeah, let's talk about, I guess, running backs are the most important position. And to your point, it's chaos all across the
Mhm.
board at running backs. Like we have the Las Vegas situation, Amir Abdullah, who replaced Sincere McCormack, who we thought was going to be that guy. Turns out, yeah, Amir Abdullah, the old man River, who's just this journeyman veteran, continues to do it once again. He's bodying Alexander Madison into the ether. So, like, we can just
Mhm.
remove Alexander Madison. He's not going to be on the Vegas roster next year. Like,
Right.
I'll be shocked if he really has a job. Like, I still think he's that good. We have the potential with Trey Benson with James Conner injury. Like there's that whole situation. He's also dealing with an injury, so it might be Michael Carter, give or take. Who knows what's going on? We have the Buffalo Bills. They basically are not going to move up in seeding, so then James Cook could sit this game out. There's a lot of chaos at the running back position. Gets in your point with Saquon Barkley because he's going for that record. Like I think they're going to probably push him at least halfway through the game until he gets it. We'll see though. Maybe he gets benched, and then you get the Chase Brown ankle injury. We haven't heard anything on that. Maybe it's Khalil Herbert in Cincinnati. I guess we'll just do running back real quick. Looking at the
Yeah.
running backs, is there anyone you prefer to target? Probably don't have much money left in front of week 18.
Yeah.
But, is there anybody that stands out to you?
No, I mean, I think Amir Abdullah will be the top one if you can grab him. At first I was hesitant about him because it looked like he was just getting the points off pass catching. He had what
Mm-hmm.
or targets and making good receptions, getting good yards out of them. And this last week he really took it over, right? So
Yeah.
this is something where we could possibly see him be the actual league winner for you in week 18. So that would probably be the top target. Curious to see what happens with Benson and Carter. Benson I know is still battling, so see what he's doing in practice. If he's limited you definitely should go pick up Michael Carter because if anything, then if Benson can't play, Carter's their workhorse guy. You know, I doubt Connor's going to go in. You know, he banged up again, so no reason for them to put him in at this point. I'm pretty sure they're out of playoff contention as well, so just doesn't make sense for them to get a guy that they just gave an extension to go out there and re-aggravate something he re-aggravated already. So go make those moves and adjust. Those will be the two guys there. You know, I talked about Barkley. He's on the verge of breaking the record, right? I believe it's Eric Dickinson that has the record for most rushing yards of just over 2,100 or something. He's on the verge of breaking it, but the type of player that Saquon Barkley is, he's not someone that really cares about the records. I mean, there was one earlier this season where he was like, hey, if you get this, you know, you extra 10 yards, you'll get, you know, the most rushing yards in a single season or a single game. And he said, nah, man, put the other guy in. You know, I'm good. Like, I don't need that. So does he really want that? It'll be a phenomenal accomplishment, especially after, you know, the whole Giant situation. But I just don't know with them being in playoffs, with Hurts being hurt, do they want to risk that? So that'll be something to tell. But if so, you know, Will Shipley, Kenneth Gainwell, guys to be considered there for him that can definitely go. Gainwell may be hurt, actually, now that I think about it.
Well, like I think that's why Will Shipley's the top guy there, right? Is because of the potential injury. But to your point, I think like with the whole situation in Arizona and the team that they're playing, it's not a bad matchup at all. It's San Francisco, right? And we just saw the Lions carve up the San Francisco 49ers. They had, I think it was, 150 yards on the ground, 28 attempts. It's like 5.6 yards a clip.
Right.
You can get there. And Arizona's been, I know their offense has been all over the place. We've seen Michael Carter. This was years ago with the Jets, but he was a productive NFL back. If those remember that long ago, I think it was 2021 was the year, 2020, 2021, one of those years. Yeah. He was productive in that system, right? In this system, if he's going to get all of the work, similar to Amir Abdullah, the difference is Amir Abdullah is playing the Chargers. That game worries me a little bit. Yeah. I haven't heard like the Chargers, they still need that like lock in their spot, so they're probably going to play everybody. So it's a little bit risky, but yeah, if you're getting anybody with volume this point in the year and you're desperate, you're dealing with these people injured, like we talk about Saquon, who he needs 101 yards. We don't know if he's like, they're not sure if he's going to play. I saw a post a couple hours ago, so they're not 100% sure. Right. There's just so much uncertainty with this week. I would just take stabs across the board at all the positions, right? Because in a lot of redraft leagues, which mainly this is what we're talking about, most teams that are out of the playoffs do not get opportunities to basically bid on players at this point in the season, right? Dynasty, it's different. Obviously, Dynasty because it's 24/7. So it's really just you and the other team in the championship, kind of like a guillotine league status where it's just like you two are bidding for the players. So take shots. If you have these bum wide receivers that you're not going to play, just drop them. Like you don't need those guys at all. They're not going to play for sure. But overall, it's a good amount of running backs so they can make a big impact for you. I don't want to spend too much time on the position because like this show could go really long. So I'd say if you had to rank them, we'll just go with the Vegas running back Abdullah. We'll say Trey Benson or Michael Carter in Arizona. We'll say Ray Davis, Will Shipley, and Khalil Herbert. How would you rank those guys?
Probably Abdullah is the top one because I know he's going to get that. Davis will be interesting if they end up saying James Cook for sure. But Herbert's also one that I'd probably put. Like the Arizona backfield, I love Trey Benson. He was my RB1 of the rookie class. But I just don't see it as like gold, where I think Khalil Herbert could go in there and sneak in and do something great because they are still in playoff contention. They haven't sealed that up yet, the Bengals. So that would be a big one. And then, like I said, Ray Davis. So I'd probably do Abdullah, Herbert, Davis, then Carter Benson, and then Shipley there too.
Yeah, like Herbert's got a tough matchup with Pittsburgh, so that's always a tough part, right? But like you're talking about with the volume, I think Abdullah is the safest of these guys. The upside shot is the Arizona, however it shifts. If you're worried about it, just go with Michael Carter. I think they all have good options for you. And then I think the last guy's probably Will Shipley because Saquon, I don't think Saquon's sitting. I think they're going to try to give him that record. Yeah. But, I mean, he could talk himself into his volume. And if no Kenneth Gainwell, which we don't know if he's out or not this upcoming week, like that could be a really big later in the week type of ad for you. So I think you can go there. Let's shift to like wide receivers because there's actually some pretty good wide receivers. Jalen McMillan still might be on waivers. If he is on waivers, go get him, man. He's been balling out the past like 3 straight weeks. He's been awesome for you. A couple other guys. We got Ricky Pearsall, Marvin Mims, both who came out. Pearsall kind of came out of nowhere. Marvin Mims specifically came out of nowhere. I know Jeremy was talking about Alec Pierce last week. He hit again. Alec Pierce, he's been consistent deep threat for them. Those are some good names to target. There's a couple other guys if you really want to focus on them. But you really get to the weeds of the wide receiver. Like we could talk about Olamide Zaccheaus, your guy. Yeah. You started him over Tyreek Hill, right?
I actually ended up starting. I got Juwan Jennings. So I actually started just
Oh, okay.
him. But
All right. I
I
mean,
will say that if I didn't make the trade to get someone for Monday night, I would have started Zacchaeus or Tyreek Hill, which would have still benefited me. So
yeah, it was a good move. Like he was, I think he was what 8 for 85 in a
yeah,
touchdown in that game. That's a hell of a performance. So you nailed that one. That was a great
yeah,
call. And then outside of that, we're talking about the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room. If you want to do the Romeo Doubs thing, I don't think he's available in most sleeper leagues. But if he is a guy that's consistently been on the field,
right.
Rashad Bateman, Quentin Johnson, those are that nature. So like, is there anyone at the wide receiver position that jumps out to you? If it's either matchup or if them just like stepping forward into a bigger role in the Week 18?
I will say, just because you hit on Jay McMillan, one of the guys I'm actually playing. So in our Dynasty League, we have no trade deadline, which I definitely
Mm-hmm.
recommend that in Dynasty Leagues. He traded Jalen McMillan for Terry McLaurin at the end, like Jalen McMillan in a second for McLaurin.
Yeah.
And not that it would have made a difference for him in the championship, but that was just lovely seeing McLaurin get 1.5 points, I think is what he got.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely in that league, not in other leagues because I have him in other leagues, but it was just
Right.
like, why would you do that, man? And he was a McMillan stand, so it's just like, dude, he's balling out. Why are you worried about trading him? But speaking of
Right.
wide receivers in general, Pearsall, I think this is a guy that with the 49ers and where they're at, if I'm not mistaken, they're out too. Like I'm pretty sure they're eliminated from
Yeah,
playoffs.
they've already been eliminated. Yep.
So I know they'll still play their guys, right? Like Purdy, let's make sure he gets the contract extension, maybe play him. But I
Mhm.
really think this is an opportunity for them to see what they have in Ricky Pearsall, really put Juwan Jennings on the map even further. Because Debo, what happens with Debo, right? Does he end up being traded? Is he someone that they work on getting an extension, whatever it may be? So I think Pearsall is someone that you definitely want to add because I think he's going to get the volume potentially as a target
Yeah.
person. Even Kittle, like they may end up saying to him like, "Hey, we're out, bro. There's no reason for you to play here." Marvin Mims, I really like. We're starting to see a little bit more of him involved in there. Um, we might see him more with like Troy Franklin maybe there
Yep.
as well. So I do like that pick there because Bo Nix, they know how to use it. Sean Payton knows how to use receivers like Marvin Mims specifically. So I would love that as well. Alec Pierce, I do like that call. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Just very worrisome. If that goes back in, so that's why we saw Pierce go in, right,
Right.
and do work because it wasn't really happening when Richardson was there. So if Flacco's the guy, then yeah, we could go with Alec Pierce there again.
Yeah, and I think the other guy it's weird. It's Wandale Robinson. He's still going under the radar. He's just getting a ton of targets. The offense sucks, and the quarterback play is not good. But it's like you're chasing the volume with these guys. It's not quite as good as Juwan Jennings is in San Francisco, but another volume hog. I think he's up to 128 targets on the season. Just something absurd for Wandale Robinson. Like if you just told me that at the beginning of the year, I'm like, how many targets is this dude getting? So
Right.
yeah, he's up to 129. He's got he's not very efficient with those because 656 yards, like that's kind of the Wandale Robinson thing. He's
Right.
strictly for PPR leagues, but I think if you're looking for guys with a high floor, it's Wandale Robinson weekly and give or take. We got a comment here from Magic. Mr. Magic, thanks for joining us. Yeah, man, like that game was just ideal for fantasy in the sense that it impacted more games than potentially any last game of fantasy football season can. And like I posted on Twitter, you had two top 12 quarterbacks, you had a top 2 running back, you had a top 3 like wide receiver, you had all of this stuff in this game. You had a number 1 tight end. Oh yeah, you also had Debo, you had all these other guys. So like this game was set up for a shootout with the Lions defense being atrocious as it is right now. It's all injured. Sort of 49ers defense can't stop the run. And this was the perfect game. So if you were going into this game trailing, you knew you had a shot if you had some of these guys. Like if you had Gibbs, you had Purdy, you had a couple of these other guys. Like teams did that. I saw a team that won 80 and they ended up winning the game. Like
Right.
it's just nuts. So yeah, I'm sorry, man. The Cooper Cup thing killed you, and that's just brutal. But that's fantasy sometimes. Sometimes it just does not go in your favor. So hopefully this was not your only league, and you had a couple other leagues. But yeah, I guess we'll answer this question here really quick, and I guess we can talk about wide receivers. Have you thought about the redraft order of the upcoming season for 2025? Do you have an idea of who your top 5 would be? If you haven't, who would your top 5 be?
Yeah. No, I haven't, but off the top 5 for redraft, assuming this is single QB as well, right? So
Yeah, I'm assuming so. Yeah.
Jamar Chase is one. You got to throw an Amon Ra there. He might be 2 there. You can still really do Justin Jefferson. I do like that. I'm not mad at that there. Brock Bowers may be someone that you may be considering there because he's had a phenomenal rookie season, right? Had it over 1,000 yards, over 100 targets. He's just killing it there. And then your running backs, I don't think you're choosing Henry or Barkley. You might want to choose Barkley. But Bijan, I think, could still make his case for one of the top there. So I would definitely say locked in is Jamar Chase, Amon Ra. And then I think, we're really questioning which running back we want to take first. I would say Bijan, personally, even with the hype of Gentry coming in and all that kind of stuff. And then your other two wide receivers, Jets and I'll just try to think off the top here with college. Not even looking at rankings now.
Well, yeah, because you still have Lamb, you have like
Yeah,
guys like that are kind of going on. You have Malik Neighbors who's going to go really high. You have,
yeah,
I mean, people are going to love Brian Thomas Jr. is probably going to be a round 2 pick. I will say Jahmyr Gibbs outscored Bijan Robinson this year by like a decent amount. He passed him last week. It's 19.8 in PPR. It's a 19.4. So they were the RB2, RB3. Henry
Sure.
was right there as well, right? So they're all kind of there. I think all these guys are going to be round 1 picks.
Yeah,
They're
for
going
sure.
to be there. Kamara, you can make the case, but like tight end's interesting because George Kittle was the best tight end fantasy production. Like he was averaging over 16 a game. Bowers was second, and then McBride, so he gets in this weird spot. But wide receivers just so deep. So if you want to go running back early, I'm assuming all those running backs will be right there. But you're gonna have your big 3 running backs are your wide receivers. You'll have T. Higgins will probably get boosted in the back of the round. So I think it's a good like exercise to kind of round out. But like I think Barkley's gonna be the clear 101 just because he was so good at the running back position. At running backs, and then it'll be like between him and Chase, I think is how it'll go out. But yeah, like you can make the case for any of those guys. It's gonna be fun. Yeah, that's what it is, especially playing Dynasty and like doing content like we are doing. It's like we're already focusing on the draft, already getting that stuff prepared. So like there's no real break for
recharge for next season.
Yeah, recharge, like recharge for a day. Maybe like a week or two, like, hey, cool, now we're doing draft picks. Oh yeah, all these rookies coming out. So yeah. Because we're gonna have Senior Bowl, we're gonna have all these combine, like it's just gonna be nonstop. It could be as 365 as you want it to be realistically, but to kind of round up the wide receivers, I'll say get back into that. Like we kind of have the guys that you're targeting. So I think Pearsall is the best of the group. I had him over Lad McConkey in my rookie rankings. That did not work out super well for me, but you live and learn. I think I had them back to back. I think in rankings. Obviously, like we talked about Brian Thomas, how much we both liked him. We're both very high on him, so it worked out for us. That one. It is what it is. If you go Pearsall, I think you got a good shot. You can go Mims. It just seems a little bit riskier to go Mims because it kind of came out of nowhere. And like to your point, your guy Olamide Zaccheaus was the wide receiver 2. It's going to be the wide receiver 2 on that team. That's really good. I don't know if they can change their position. Washington, I haven't found out or not. So I don't know if they're really going to be benching a lot of guys, but I don't think they're going to bench Zaccheaus. Like that's the thing. I think he's still going to play, even as back court, right? So I think he'll be fine, right? So it's just either one of those guys.
But do they bench Jaden Daniels, right? Because that's
the problem. You're gonna see some like quarterbacks go down like this week because you could get into these names where it's like Parker Washington, really down, the Keyshawn Boutte, the John Mechie, Calvin Austin's of the world. I think Hollywood Brown's a good target actually, but they're benching Mahomes, so it's like that's kind of I don't want to do the Hollywood Brown thing. Unfortunately,
we know Detroit plays Minnesota. That's for the NFC North title. So Philly clinches the NFC East, right? So Washington and Green Bay are both 11-5. The Rams are they won their division. So it really comes down to Tampa can still get in. Tampa and Atlanta are playing for their division title too. So really, Washington and Green Bay are playing for a matchup. So they do need a win to keep their spot, to not be lesser seed. So we might see Jaden Daniels here. That'll be fun to watch.
That would be dope. Yeah, because they're both going to be on the road, right? Because they didn't win. They're not the division winners, so they're going to be traveling wherever they go. And they'll probably be one's going to play Tampa because I'm assuming Tampa's going to beat Atlanta. But you never know. Right. Maybe Atlanta pulls that out and it switches. And then the other division would be the 2nd seed. So somebody's going to play the 2 seed. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see those teams. I'm excited to see them. Heck yeah, man. Jaden Daniels put up a monster performance last week. Maybe he could do it again this week for you. Right. Speaking of quarterbacks, I think let's transition to quarterbacks. Talk about those guys. Quarterback's always been tough the last few weeks of the season because it's so thin. Like everyone, and even in these redraft 1 QB leagues, people love to just score quarterbacks, and I don't understand it. I've been preaching against it for years, but teams continue to do it. So I will say, you can do the Joe Flacco experience if you want, but you know how much of a roller coaster it is. Drake May is just a much better player. I think at this point in time, I would much rather do Drake May. Right. Talk about Bryce Young. Bryce Young, that game was a nightmare for him. He was under pressure the entire game, but he did his best to carry them. And I will say, without Mahomes, you could do the Carson Wentz thing this week because Carson Wentz is a mobile quarterback. He will give you some rushing. Outside of that, we got Michael Penix. I don't want to do the Josh Dobbs stuff or the
we'll do that.
Aaron Rodgers. No thanks on those guys because you could have maybe they play Tyrod Taylor in New York, and I guess Brock Purdy did hurt himself, so like he's probably not going to play this week, right? So yeah, it's kind of chaotic. Is there any quarterback that you are interested in that stands out to you above the rest, or is it just a couple of those guys at the top?
Hopefully your quarterback's playing so you don't have to deal with this, but probably Flacco's the safest, just because we know they can move the ball. It looks like they're actually understanding, hey, we have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, even with Richardson there. We can make sure that he's running the ball, which is what they've been doing, but that opens it up better for Flacco. So the reason, when Flacco was there, Taylor wasn't necessarily doing all those things. So now it's like, okay, now we have him. We have a running game. We have a good quarterback that can control the pocket and get the ball out quickly. Drake May, if he's there, why not go grab him? I think that's still a very good value for him. But yeah, I mean, hopefully in these situations, your quarterback is there and you're riding the guys that took you to the very championship too. So
100%. And like Russell Wilson's rostered 51% of leagues, so he might be available. He's playing Cincinnati, man. He put up 26 fantasy points against them last time. Cincinnati is a defense that continues to give up points. So if Russell Wilson's there, just grab him. I think he's extremely safe this week, even though he's been kind of up or down lately. Let's hit on tight ends for a second. It's gross. Like, I'm not gonna lie, folks. Like there's just not much good at the tight end position. Yeah. So 100%. We can talk about it. I mean, we talked about Chig. He was fine last week, right? So if you do the Chig stuff again, you could do it. He's consistent in his role. I guess he's emerging as their number 2 option. Brian Callahan did hype him up last week and was talking about him, so I feel a little bit more secure about him than I did previously, right? Because it's 3 straight games of 5+ catches. Noah Fant, Tyler Conklin's the world, Will Dissly. Like, no one stands out to me. So it's kind of just pick your choice. Mike Gesicki went nuclear last week. I don't think he's going to go against Pittsburgh, but you could do that again. Is at tight end, is there anyone you are kind of chasing or anyone that looks good to you?
Disley, I think, is a good one just because he came back and got the starts right, and he logged the most snaps for the tight ends for the Chargers, so I think that's very solid there. Conklin's someone that we've seen it, and he finally had that kind of breakout game to show, oh yeah, I'm still a good tight end. So that's someone where I think he could have some value going into that final week as well. You may consider maybe Brenton Strange. He's the rookie that will probably continue to get it with Evan Ingram out, so that's someone where he's there. And then if he's available because of his age, Zach Ertz, man. Zach Ertz balled out there. So I know he's in 50% of the leagues. So if he's available, check it out because that's someone where a lot of people don't want it because of the age. He's an old tight end. But, I mean, that's someone that can definitely be a league winner for you.
Yeah, Old Man Rivers just hold it down. I know I got a question about in the DMs about Ben Sinnott. They're like, what do you think about him? And I'm like, the way people are viewing his price doesn't make sense to me. They're not really putting a discount on him, even though he didn't do anything year 1. Right. Zach Ertz, I think Zach Ertz is under contract. I think he is another year there. I'm not 100% sure. But if he's a free agent, then he becomes a buy. I don't want to buy Ben Sinnott if he's behind Zach Ertz again, because then you have to do the Trey McBride thing where halfway through year 2, that's when Trey McBride kind of bumped up and did his thing, right? You're really counting on that from Ben Sinnott. That's asking a lot. So ideally for that, I would pivot away. But Zach Ertz, man, like what he's going to do. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be running routes. He's just a high floor option, and he showed you the ceiling that few tight ends can do last week. So I think that's a really good call.
And with Sinnott, they can definitely with Sinnott they can go in there and get another tight end too. This tight end class is pretty nice, so if they go get someone like maybe a Harold Fannin Jr., just a nice receiving tight end, that could deftly push Sinnott back even further. If you can get him on the low, I would, but I'm not necessarily chasing it either. I'm not trying to buy him, but if someone sends an offer for him for like a 4th round pick, why not?
Yeah, I'm not trying to set a second for him because that's what you were paying. Like he wasn't even going for a second, before the season, right? So I think if anybody wants that for him, you just tell him kick rocks. Like it's not worth it. You could just go buy productive tight ends at that cost, really, because what's the upside to not? Like, is he going to be a difference maker? Kind of, I don't know. We got a question here from NRB75. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to remove this banner real quick. Thoughts on Garendo, Herbert, or Abdullah instead of Jacobs? I think Garendo in his role, but it's no Purdy. It's going to be a lot more interesting, like that offense, right? If Purdy misses all phrase, we don't have to miss. Abdullah's the safest because nothing really is changing for him, even though it's a bad matchup. Herbert, if there's no Chase Brown, then hell yeah, I'm really interested in Herbert because they have to play to win, right? That offense. And you see how they value the running back position. So I will say if there's no Chase Brown, Herbert's going to be the one I would like in that matchup. But Garendo seems decently safe. Right now, how I'll have them rank is Abdullah. I know Garendo's playing, so I'll go Garendo, then Herbert. But Herbert has the chance to rise to the top of this list if the Chase Brown injuries holds and he does not play. So we kind of just have to pay attention to that. keep it on the wind. I would just make claims for all three of these guys, like right, and starting them. I'm assuming they're all on your roster since you're talking about starting them. But yeah, I would say Abdullah, Garendo, Herbert's how I have them ranked. How do you? I know we haven't done rankings yet this week, but how would you go about ranking these guys this week?
I mean, if Jacobs plays, I don't think you want to bench him. I mean, it's against the Bears, and they need to play to get a higher draft spot, if I'm not mistaken. So I think Jacobs, you want to lock him in there. 7 straight weeks of scoring a touchdown. He's been someone that you're riding. Granted, last week he got below 10 points, but he's someone you're riding. So I think you want to play him regardless. Garendo, as you mentioned, is the interesting one, but we know he's going to get the work. And that's someone where we'll talk about him a little bit more later. Abdullah, though, bad matchup, but man, they know they'll use him. And
pass catcher, yeah.
Garendo, that I don't see Garendo as a pass catcher, right? They have multiple other ones where Abdullah, Bowers, and Myers are issues there, but those are more like deep threats where Abdullah's just going to cut it out in the flats and get the pass there for you. So I say Jacobs if he's playing and Abdullah there, and then Garendo if you need a flexion, you can. But it just definitely scares me if it's not Purdy and what the offense could look like. Herbert without Chase Brown. Possibly, I think we know what we get in Herbert, regardless of where he's at. If anything, the Bengals, they need a win, so I don't think they're going to use a lot of time running the ball. I think they're going to try to score with their playmakers. Get Chase, get Higgins. You might even see Gesicki in there a little bit more, but I think we're going to see a limited running game unless it's at the goal line. But even then, it might not be Herbert that's actually doing the goal line carry. So he's my last one there. Robinson. Nah, I think I'd start Abdullah, Garendo, or Robinson right now. So,
yeah, it's just so hard to touch Robinson right now because I don't know if he's dealing with injury or what's going on, but it's just not been good the last few weeks for him. So and the thing on Garendo, the last 2 games he started because he missed the middle of not last week, but the week before he played 75% snaps. He has 4 receptions in both of those games. So he's clearly has a decent pass catching role in the offense, even though they're trying to prioritize Debo and stuff. It's just not worked well with Debo at all. Debo has just not been that same player. So I think Garendo can do some decent stuff for you, and I think he's just safer. So Abdullah and Garendo are the 2 guys. I would prefer. Herbert can jump, but we need to see it for him. So he's going to be 3rd until that changes. I'm fine starting Abdullah and Garendo over Brian Robinson personally. I don't mind. They'll all be very close in rankings. I'm just gonna say that right away. But if Jacobs is starting, they're not benching Love or anything like that, then hell yeah, you play Jacobs. What you get out of him. So I think we're kind of on the same wavelength with that. But yeah, that's a quick recap for waiver wires. If anybody has any other waiver wire questions, we'll answer them in the chat. That's kind of what the show's about. But we can kind of pivot to our season long recap and things we learned along the way or good and bad moves we made. I know we were talking off screen, so do you want to kick this one off about one of the players you want to talk about?
Yeah, man. I think just we talked about it all the time in the league. You don't win at your draft. So whether you're in a startup, your rookie drafts, redraft, whatever it is, you don't win at the draft. What that means is you gotta be active in your league. You gotta trade. Make trades. Don't sit there. You have to pick up the waiver wires. We had tons of waiver wire hits this year. I mean, it might have just been for a week, but maybe that's the week that you needed to win. And you look back, you're like, shit, man, had I made that pickup, I would have won and I would have been in playoffs. In 2 of my big leagues, I was the 6th seed and I ended up winning the championship. But it's because I stayed active, making the moves. And it becomes that because in Dynasty, in redraft, you get some people that get hurt, right? Let's just say CMC. Okay, CMC gets hurt. You have other guys that are there, but you don't want to pivot. You aren't willing to trade. And I think a lot of times in all types of fantasy football leagues, we fall in love with our players, so we don't want to move them, right? And don't get me wrong, there's tons. I had Josh Allen 5 years ago, ended up trading him. And he's been QB1 since. That was hard trade, and I ended up beating the guy actually that I traded him to in the championship when he had Josh Allen and I had Baker Mayfield. So it's just those are different things where you work around. It's don't fall in love with these guys. Make sure you're making those trades. This year, Brian Thomas Jr., I drafted him at 112. And I loved him. He did phenomenal. He's the rookie wide receiver 1, over 1,000 yards. I'm pretty sure he leads the rookies with touchdowns. Phenomenal. Guess what? I traded Brian Thomas Jr. for Tyreek Hill and Jonathan Taylor because they were having down weeks. And the guy was already losing because his players are having down weeks. And he's like, I need to start thinking about the future. So go get those vets, get the guys, and, trade your rookies. Don't fall in love with these guys. Continue to make moves. The guys that you're falling in love with Are they helping you win? Because in the all, it doesn't matter. Like even if you're in the mood to take and you're looking at that, sure, that's a strategy. But in the
Mhm.
end, you're trying to win. Yes, we're playing a dynasty league, but each year I'm trying to win. So if I'm gonna pivot off players that help me win the season, why not? That's what I'm gonna do. And that's what I think it was all about for me is doing that. And that's a big move in just winning your fantasy football leagues, just staying active.
Yeah, like one of there's the flip side of that. Like you have to be careful on the assets you're buying, these
Yep.
depreciating assets, like a Tyreek Hill, right? Because in the offseason in my home dynasty, one of the teams just completely tanked. Like they completely blew it up. They were a contender, lost in the semifinals. They lost the championship to me the year before, and they just finally pulled the plug. They're like, screw it, and they tore it down to the studs, which is a little bit too much because it takes you like 4 years
Awesome.
to rebuild from that process. But
Right.
what they did is they traded Tyreek Hill for someone's first that they didn't roster, someone else first. That's turning out to be like a top 2 pick. It potentially could be a top 1 pick because we have the lottery in that league. So
Yeah.
like you could have traded Tyreek Hill for Asher Jetty, right? And you're looking
Yeah.
at that like, fuck, this sucks. So you have to be
Yeah.
very careful when you're buying these depreciating assets. You're not paying
Mhm.
top dollar. And this gets into my like I love Christian McCaffrey too much, and I know I have a bias for him because I had an offer for Nico and a first round pick to trade away McCaffrey in the offseason. I tried to squeeze a second out of them. They backed out, and that trade looks horrendous right now, right?
Yeah.
Because I could have had Nico and just a random 2025 first. Would have been nice. But now I'm just sitting there with McCaffrey and I'm looking at it like, oh my gosh. Like I knew I had to pivot
No,
off of him, but I thought I could, work it out a little bit more. So you have to
right.
know your biases with certain players. And like you talk about Brian Thomas Jr., we both love him. Like I'm not, I have him basically as a top 5 dinosaur. I was talking about this
Mm.
with Jeremy. It's like I'm
Right.
not trading that dude unless you're overpaying now. And we talked about this in season. We're like, yeah, make that move. It was fine. We probably should have been like, hold off on it. But you got JT, and if you had JT starting for you, which you did, he was crushing down the stretch, right? So
Yeah.
I think it worked out, and you're okay because you're gonna have JT, and it's not a terrible trade. Like it'll work fine for you. It sucks
There,
with
there,
the off. See,
there's other pieces involved in the trade too, but yeah, I mean it hurts, right? Because dynasty, yeah, Brian Thomas is gonna be a stud there. We know
mm-hmm.
he's their guy there now. My thought on it is you get Tyreek for another couple of years potentially, and then JT hopefully can just maintain that RB1 role.
Yeah,
But also in dynasty, as you mentioned, CFC running backs are hard to come by. So if you can get one of your top 10
yes,
running backs, go out there and get it because wide receivers are so deep that yes, Brian Thomas is a top 5 wide receiver in dynasty potentially.
mm-hmm.
You can still get a Stephon Diggs who looked great, before he got injured, right? You can get him on the low. You can still go get T Higgins who's still good, who's less than Brian Thomas in a
Yeah, the
sense,
market.
and I think
Mm-hmm.
being aware, it comes into knowing your league mates as well, and who you're trading
Yes,
and what to do. Because what I've been trying to get into one league is like people are offering me trades, and they're not bad trades, but I'm also like, look, man, I know what our league is and who they value. This isn't a
mm-hmm.
person name value. So although it's a good trade, if I make that trade, I can't flip that guy even after a great week, right? So it's like, how can you make sure you're adjusting that? That comes with knowing your league, knowing who they're talking about, what they're pivoting off of. Because say no one in your league talks about Derrick Henry. Grant, they probably are top RB, but being a 30-year-old running back, no one's talking about his. So if you grab him, if he has a bad year, is that name value still there for him, or are they already switching on to your, Jamar Gibbs, your Bisons, your Gensies to say no, we rather have them over Henry, even though I'm a contender team, So
Right.
those are big parts in it to be aware of when you're making specific trades. I think in a lot of dynasty leagues in general, no one wants to lose a trade, right? So
Right.
on to yours where you're like you try to get a second on top of that. Sometimes I agree with CFC for Nico. We didn't understand what Nico was going to be this year. Good trade, but without understanding what Nico is, it's not as great. But if you know it now, it's like damn, I should have done that. But a lot of times, don't over push it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
don't if you have a CMC, and before you're like, man, he's worth 3 firsts. He's not worth 3 firsts right now. I don't think he is.
Nope. Nope. Nope.
I think you're lucky if you get 2 firsts for him. I think you can still get a
100%.
first, but don't push it. Don't go out there and say, hey, it's 2 firsts, and now you're sitting on the injured running back again.
That's
Right?
the
Go
thing.
get what you can. Maybe get a first and go get a Trey Benson and a I don't know. I'm just trying to think of someone random. Maybe a tight end. Like go get a Trey Benson and a Laporta who had a down year, maybe at a first for that. Something like that. Something that doesn't hurt you, like cripple you, but it's not what you wanted initially. but something also we know he's the injuries are back, so it's like you just gotta be aware. Don't try to get the maximum all the time, and sometimes you may have to lose the trade up front, but in the end you end up winning, right? What I mean by that is
Yeah.
you may lose it right away because your guy goes off that you traded away, but yeah, you got the guys that are rookies that took you that year or the next year for them to actually go off. So now you win. So you lose right now, we end up winning in the future. A lot of people don't like to lose, but a lot of times you have to think about, okay, is this potential that I win this in the future too? And that can help you in the trades.
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, I think a lot of times we hyper focus on individual players in leagues when, like, you're deciding between these old depreciating assets where it's Henry, it's Kamara, it's McCaffrey, all these guys. The difference is not going to be that much between those guys. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you get injured like McCaffrey, and like you can't really do anything about that.
Right.
But if they're playing the entire season out, like what's the difference between Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or
Right.
McCaffrey's healthy? Like it's like a point or two. And if that point or two really gonna make or break your season, but the market value is a freaking first plus between the two of them. So that's why instead of paying out for McCaffrey, you just go get cheap a Henry version. Or like right now, Kamara, nobody probably wants Kamara because he's dirt cheap, even though he's locked in contract for 2 more years. So like you can get cheap RB1 production in Alvin Kamara, you should have to deal with injury. So like Kamara is the cheapest to buy. Like CMC still holds all that value above Kamara because it's Christian McCaffrey. And the name cashing doesn't make sense. So when you're doing that, you kind of have to like step away and stop being like, I got to get McCaffrey. It's like, all right, can I go get this cheap guy? Can I go get Keenan Allen for like a third? You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that, who was a solid player. So in Dynasty, it's a lot easier because you can kind of move in, redraft. It's a little hard to pay top dollar. But yeah, it's just about knowing your biases and like working around those because it's the way to be a good, continually like year over year Dynasty contender because you can make it happen if you do it right. So I would say that's like the most impactful thing I've learned over the years because I've done that before where I paid up for specific players way too much. And I look back and I'm like, that was stupid. Why did I do that deal? Right. So yeah, you live and learn with Dynasty. It's always a learning experience for you. The market will shift. Like we'll see. It wouldn't shock me if we see running backs become overvalued again based off of this offseason, right? With those guys and the wide receivers become cheaper again. It's just the cycles, whatever it is.
Well, especially talking about overpriced, like during this past offseason, maybe you're a contender team and you wanted to get Josh Allen. So you tried everything you could, but you had to pay, your life savings away to get Josh Allen, right? You could have got Baker Mayfield for not even half of your life savings and still won the ship, right? I mean, so there's things to consider like that as like you just said. Yeah, you can go after those guys, and sometimes you can hit a lick. Sometimes this guy's not paying attention. You're like, oh, I paid a second for Josh Allen. If anyone does that, kick them out your league because that should not happen. But if it does it, at the same time be like, okay, I can't afford this for Josh Allen, but I can go get Baker that can do. I can go get Sam Darnold, for even less than Baker at that point. So it's like those guys are the ones you want to consider because what I try to tell some of my leagues is everyone's focused on building in Dynasty. They want to stack their bricks, up, and continue to build. A lot of times, though, and I'm guilty for it too, we get stuck in the building process. So we build, but we never build to a championship, right? So you get stuck in building game this youth. You're like, oh, this guy's a vet. I'm going to trade him away for you. Oh, this guy's young. I'm going to trade him for a vet. Or whatever it may be. You're stuck in building. You're not building to a ship, though. You're just building a tower that's going up, and you never get to the actual trophy. So consider that is you don't need your full studs. I mean, one of my leagues, my roster, Baker Mayfield, Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Calvin Ridley, Adam Thielen, McBride, Aaron Jones, Juwan Jennings, Sam Darnold. If you would have said, hey, these guys are on championship roster, probably just Jonathan Taylor is the main one you're really focusing on that says, oh, this guy could be a one, right? Everyone else, it's like you just gotta make sure it's pivoting. And then advanced football is all about what ifs. Any given week, it's a what if this happens. Well, if you stack it right, your what this becomes reality, and this is where you're at. So don't get stuck in the building process, but get stuck in the now. What's going to get you to the belt that you can grab it and take it down instead of just saying, I want to build the best dynasty ever. But if you're like the Buffalo Bills and gets to the championship 4 years in a row and never win, what's the point? Like the point is to win, not to just get there, right? So you got to do that.
Yeah, 100%. There's in that league I was referencing earlier, the team went out and traded for Josh Allen. They gave an early first and a mid first. That turned into Jaden Daniels, and he had the option of Xavier Worthy, Lab McConkey, like Brock Bowers, all of these players they could have picked. They picked Xavier Worthy, and that's a rebuilding team, and it worked out really well for them. And the guy was super pissed because he's a contender. He wanted Jaden Daniels, could have taken Jaden Daniels. They're like, no, just get Josh Allen. This is the security you're paying for, right?
Yeah.
You're not the risk he doesn't bust because he turns into Caleb Williams or
Right.
freaking like one of these other guys, right? So you have to be willing to kind of accept the risk with certain moves. And it's all about roster construction, all that fun stuff. But yeah, I agree. People get caught up in the building aspect instead of trying to win championships because that's like what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
You should do both. You should have a good roster and win the championship instead of just being like, ooh, look at my sexy young team with all these rookies. That team's not going to win you shit. Like that's just not going to happen. You kind of have to find a good balance between the two of them. As I'm looking right now in one of my leagues, they're putting in an empire rule in my team because they're so dominant in the 32 team league. They're trying to reset the league, and I'm like, bro, just stop trying to reset the league. And half the league's like, dude, stop trying to reset it. He's like, look at this guy's team. No one's gonna win. And this is a humble brag or whatever, but it's like coming through on my timeline right now. I'm just like, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. So we'll see. They might reset that league, and I'm gonna be like, fuck, I built this team for nothing. But it is.
It's hard. That's something too. My league is talking about possibly raising the buy-in for one. And it's a dynasty, so I'm not against it, but I'm also like, man, you have dynasty. We had a set one. It's 5 years in already. It's like this could be rough for some people in the sense of if we want to raise it, they're maybe not contending. So now you're raising and telling them to push in more money. I'm trying to say, hey, if we raise it, we got to do a redraft. We got to, have a complete pot. People are against it, and I get it, but at the same time, it's like you invested in the money that we're paying to the teams you have, thinking, all right, I'm building this process. But now it's like, now I roll, you know what I mean? Like we're separated. We have our power teams, we have our down teams because we're 5 years in. So we know who's top, we know who's mid, we know who's less. So now it's like, all right, it's not equal playing ground if we're basically saying let's do a new league with new prices, right? So a lot of things considered there. I mean, I've done constellations where we have find orphans, and you're like, all right, everyone that's an orphan, we're doing constellations, so your rosters are released and it's still a draft between y'all. That works out phenomenally. I think people love that. So it's just something to go in there and make it happen. But yeah, I mean, the off season, it's all about improving your league. I think every off season, if you're in dynasties, do things in a poll. Let your league vote on it. Make sure 100%. You find things to just say, hey, what do we like this year? What do we didn't like? Maybe you didn't try out the start rule or the auto sub rule. That's something that I found was phenomenal. A lot, it helped out a lot. But those are things that's like, hey, let's try it out and let's see it. You can always adjust.
Yeah, I think to your point, like one of my favorite things about my home dynasty league is that we have a winter meeting where we all get together, and if you can't be in person, you do a video chat. Like you're part of this. We go over rules. Anybody that has rules they want to bring up. So I'm kind of like what they call a shadow commissioner. I will talk to everyone in the league. Send me ideas you have, and I will bring them up because like I'll keep it organized. I have stuff written down. A lot of the guys will just fly off the handles with stuff they say doesn't make sense. So I'm like, I'll come in organized and we talk about stuff. We vote on it. If it's a major rule change, it's 75%. If it's smaller stuff, we just need majority. So 51%, right? So like you kind of like tinker with the league. And I'm the ultimate league tinkerer. Like, but I'll say random stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'll try this out. And people will be like, no, let's not do that. And I'm like, and we've done this. As the people have made more money, like they're getting older, we're all in our like 30s plus, and some of us are pushing 40. There's money like we can pay more than we did 15 years ago, right? Because we have more money. So people are like raising the league. So, but if you're against it, then we don't do it. So it's just all about finding ways to make your league more fun. And I think that's one of the ways to do that. But that's just something that we do. Might not work for everybody, but it can work for you guys. So yeah, it's just find out what works for you, go with that. And you can always find individual leagues that if you like specific roster constructions or scoring points or whatever, like you could find any dynasty league that works for you, or regional league or whatever, Empire League, or there's a million different types of leagues. So if you want to try something out, go try something out. It's fun. That's what this game about. It should just be fun at the end of it, I
think. 100%. Now it's all about adjusting and making sure you like you said, make the league better, right? Make the league fun, right? Because you go through the same rules 7 years in a row. It's like, oh, that's not necessarily what we want, right? So adjust, and of course get your league involved, right? But always be open to new thoughts, especially if you're the commissioner.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking about the kind of things that we hit on or whatever, like our Brian Thomas Jr. stuff, the level where we both were very much in our Brian Thomas Jr.
Right.
Let's go to the flip side. Whatever stuff where either your process was wrong or a player that you liked, they did not hit. And you can take this one over and I can finish it up if you want to start it.
Yeah, so I think one we'll both talk about is Bucky Irvin. I'm an Oregon stan, right? You talk about other way, I can't take my thing off, but
yeah, you got it right there. Yep,
there it is. Right, so
baby.
So Oregon, right? I love Oregon. I loved Bucky going in. I was like, this is Bucky. He's gonna do phenomenal things. And then the combine happened. And when the combine happened, Bucky had, I'm pretty sure he had like one of the worst scores at the combine, like an all-time low. And because of that, I dropped him in my rankings. Rashad White had a great year last year too, so I was like, "There's no way he's gonna do this." Bucky Irvin had what, over 1,400 total yards on 44% snaps. Phenomenal season. This guy was
Yeah.
a top RB in the league. If you drafted him, you probably got him maybe late second, early third. Just really a steal in the draft. My thing that I learned here on that is, man, the combine's cool. I love it. I love watching it, but watch the tape, right? On tape, I was like, Bucky Irvin's the man. He knows how to make people miss. He has the speed, he has the agility, he has it all for what you want in an NFL running back. Combine happened, and I said, okay, maybe not like that. On the flip side, Isaac Guerrero, we talked about him. He had a phenomenal combine. He had the fastest time for the running backs. It's like, oh, snap, this guy's going to the 49ers. He's going to be phenomenal if CMC goes down. What happens? CMC goes down. Oh, snap, it's going to be Isaac Guerrero. And we get this guy named Jordan Mason coming in. And Jordan Mason's now the RB1 for the team, and Guerrero's not. So the combine, watch it. It's fun to watch. But when you're looking at these guys, go back and watch the tape too. It's not all flowers just because they have the fastest 40 time, just because they have the fastest shuffle, just because they have the most bench press. That's great, but that's still not what they do on tape, right? So be aware about that. That's something I really learned, coming in, because that was the biggest thing for the running backs this year, or this past year, was like that combine. I was like, all right, I'm gonna see who's good, who's not, kind of. This year, running back class is so deep where it's like it doesn't matter what they do in the combine. I love these guys, so just be aware about that, and hopefully you got Bucky, because I didn't, because I felt I took him on my board. So.
Yeah, you can go back to our tapes when we were doing this pre-combine stuff. I was like, Bucky Irving's my RB1. Like, I love Bucky Irving. You watch him on tape, and everything is like excellent. Like, everything, missed tackles force, his ability to move in space, and all this stuff. And I'm like, no doubt about it. Like, I thought he would do fine at the combine. He had an abysmal combine, and similar, reminded me of Kyron Williams, how he tanked his combine too. But you watch both of those guys play in college. You watch him in Notre Dame. You watch Bucky Irving in Oregon, and even in Minnesota, Bucky Irving. Like, everywhere he went, he was really good. And this was where I made overcorrected to that. Yeah. On the flip side, there's guys like Brian Thomas Jr., where it's you see the really talented player, and then they blow the doors off the combine, and you're like, oh fuck, like this guy to them, and that was part of the reason why I was even more on Brian Thomas Jr. There's also the other end of the spectrum where it's like a Jacob Cowling, and people are like, oh, he ran a 4.38, and I'm like, yeah, he's a low A-dot player. He does not create in space at all. Like, this guy's not going to be a good professional NFL wide receiver. And people were trying to tell me, like, oh, he's the wide receiver in San Francisco. And I'm like, dude, he's not better than freaking Ricky Pearsall. He's not going to get out. And you're like seeing this. He's like a special teamer. And I'm like, so as much as I want to be like, yeah, this is a big mistake. Like, I'm still going to ding a running back when they're that bad at the combine, because they're both smaller. They both did stuff. But it's like, maybe not just take them off your board. It's kind of the process. I still, and it's weird, like, it's the whole community did it with Bucky Irving. There were a few guys, like, I'll shout out Dynasty's Ultimate, like, he was still very much in on him. He was like one of the few people I knew that was like, nah, fuck it, he's really good. And I was like, he is good, but man, I don't know. In one of the leagues, he fell to like third round, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I will take Bucky Irving again. So I had him, and he won me like one of my championships, and I was like, man, I regret this so much. But it's just like, in the majority of my leagues, he went super late, and I was still just like, I don't know if I could pull the trigger. And like, with the other end of it is like the Trey Benson. And like, I know you were very much into Trey Benson. Why I didn't like Trey Benson, because he's like the speed sort guy, he's a freak and all this stuff. Dude, like his recognition of plays was so slow to me, and I was just like, I don't know, dude, I'm scared off of it. Like, it's not clicking. And then you see James Conner, and you're like, yeah, that's the dude, right? So it's interesting when we reflect back on a couple of these guys. Like, I know you really liked Ray Davis, and he's shown pretty good. It's just he's stuck behind a really good running back, right? So it's kind of that too. So it's with Bucky Irving, it's a tough learning lesson, because I was like, I should not have dinged him as much as I did, because this draft class at about, once we get past Penix, who was like 204 range, it kind of really started to fall off. And I know there was like, if you got Ladd McConkey in that range, congrats. Usually he was already gone. But like the Jalen Polks, who I really liked. I liked McMillan ahead of Polk, and then I put Polk above because of draft capital. That was a mistake on my part. Like, I was like, nah, McMillan's game will translate better. And of course, you're seeing that right now. Jacob Polk's having one of the worst wide receiver seasons we've ever seen
Yeah.
from a rookie. Like, so
Yeah.
yeah, we can go on this tangent. I'm kind of going all over the place with it, but yeah, it's just
No.
what we learn sometimes is don't just put so much eggs in the basket of the combine, right? Like, if you like a player pre-combine, and if you see the stuff and you think it translates, like, then you know what? It doesn't have to be all combine. I think that's the biggest thing, because good players are good. Like, I just sometimes I know it's just like a very simpler statement, but like it's sometimes it's just that simple, man. Like, guys that are good on the field can be good on the field, and you're seeing that where I think the community is doing this too, where we're seeing people being like, you know what? I know y'all love these metrics of like the speed score and all that fun stuff, but there's more to that makes it a good NFL player, right? And that's the thing with like running backs and wide receivers. Like, some of these guys are really good at separating in space. They use these little trick techniques with their hands, or they find ways that they have really good vision and things of that nature, and it makes up for their lack of ability. So it's just not that simple. Because when I first got into Dynasty, I was hammering home speed scores and doing that stuff, and like my hit rates were not that good,
Right.
and I was like, maybe we got to pivot off of this. And I think that's a good learning point to kind of pivot off of this.
Well, even with that, speaking of going outside rookies, but even just talking about players, I think we're in an era, we've hit on this here and there throughout the season. We're in an era where age is becoming a non-factor in a sense for running backs. There was a time where it's like 27 is the dead zone. Like, I don't want a running back past 27. You look at the top players. Let me pull up the leaderboard here for running backs. Top running backs: Saquon Barkley, 27; Derrick Henry, 30; Josh Jacobs, 26. He's pushing 27. Alvin Kamara, 9, 29; James Conner, 10, 29. We're past an era where modern medicine has allowed these guys to not, those injuries aren't as significant, right? It used to be like an ACL injury, which a lot of these running backs have had it. Yep. They're done. It's like Achilles is still it. If they get an Achilles, chances are they're done. But ACL used to be, that's a season ending. I don't want to deal with them anymore either. Now it's not the case. So if any running back you had that had an ACL injury, or even the wide receiver, you could possibly still go get them for a low, even if they're good, right? That age is becoming something not as great. We talk about wide receivers. Yeah, the wide receivers have transitioned over, but you had Terry McLaurin, who was a 29-year-old wide receiver, top 6, top 5, depending on what your league scoring was, right?
Yeah.
Mike Evans still dominant at 31, right? So you have all these guys that are still dominant in there, that the system really matters, right? If they're getting used, but also just understanding, don't let the age deter you from not trading for them. Now, I'm not saying go overpay, like, don't, I'm not sure if I would consider a first round Kamara. If there's a late one, I'm not mad at it if you feel you can contend. But at the same time, but don't think you need to. Don't feel like that's too much. Like, I'm not trying to top first, don't get me wrong, but don't think that's too much if you feel you're contending, because a lot of times these guys that are aging, it's not necessarily the same age game it was. We're going to see transitions, of course, and things may fall off any given year. But hell, Adam Thielen was possibly a league winner for a lot of you because he got the targets down the stretch, and he was the guy that made it happen. So consider those things when it comes to building. Yes, you want youth in Dynasty, but at the same time, you can still build a solid team with some vets and still get the job done. So the age is less of a factor. I think we saw it more so this year. We saw the wide receivers push, like the young wide receivers come in, but I think we knew that was coming just with how talented the wide receivers are. The running backs this year might be the year we see it, because, again, this running back class is very talented, but these still guys are there. Like, if Derrick Henry is still with the Ravens at the end of it for next season to start, he's still going to be a top 5 running back. Just the way they use him, like, he's still great. And the way I think I saw like a tweet not too long ago talking about he spends like $100K a year just on his like nutrition. I don't know if that maybe for the season alone, like just that's how good he is, and it's just make sure he has the right nutrition as far as what he's eating, what he's drinking, what he's doing workout, like all that is just specifically for that and that alone. And then he has his own workout things, like that's just for what he's doing with his body himself. So it's, don't be afraid to make those moves, because people might be scared of age. So, hey, go try and buy him and be like, look, bro, this is an aging running back, and you don't want him on your team.
You don't want him,
I have Trey Benson for you, who's great. You know what I mean? So
right, we'll flip. I think people learned too many lessons from that 2014, 2015 running back classes, which are just abysmal. 15 had Gurley, but you're talking about like just guys that are not good players, like Bishop Sankey, Carlos Hyde, Devonta Freeman popped for a little bit, but like Jeremy Hill, Terrence West, all of these guys that were first round rookie picks of the 2 year span, people were terrified of running backs based off of that. And then we get this 16 class, which is it's Ezekiel Elliott and it's like Derrick Henry, which lays the foundation for 2017. And then it's fucking just wheels up with those guys, right? Where you have CMC, you have Leonard Fournette, you have Alvin Kamara, you have a bunch of like Joe Mixon. You have this bounty of just ridiculously Hall of Fame level running backs that set the table for the next. We're going in 8 years at this point with these guys, right? So, like, I think we kind of overlearned from that class, and it really shifted Dynasty for like 5 to 6 years where people are like, oof, running backs. I don't know, man. Right. And you also had the elite wide receiver class 2014 through 23, like the Evans of the world and those guys. Right. So it kind of shifted how we view running backs. And I get it. Like the window is shorter with these guys, but these Hall of Fame, these really ridiculously elite players, even McCaffrey, if he's going to come back and be healthy, which is a big if, he's on the field, dude. He's a true difference maker. Like, so. Right. 100%. I get it. Like, we don't want to like overvalue running backs because the window is shorter, but you can really look at like age and then like the total touches, like that kind of like it slowly starts to trickle off. We're at that point where you're going to get maybe, I want to say this with Henry, like 1 or 2 more years, probably like at most. And it's just like, you have to be okay accepting it as a contender. Like if you buy these guys, the Mixons, the Henrys, the Kamaras, the CMCs, like the end is near. So you're not going to be able to drag this on for 5 years. Like that's just not how it's going to work. Right. You have to accept that if you're willing to buy it, be okay with them just dying on your roster. If you're okay with that, that's okay. It is what it is. Same thing with these wide receivers too, like Evans. Like I don't know how long Mike Evans has, but like he's never been the super fast guy. So you think he's just going to be a big body dude that's going to bully touchdowns for 3 more years probably? Like I think that's entirely possible.
Get 1,000 yards,
Yeah, like it's just, it kind of is what it is. So he might not be the wide receiver 1 overall, but he's gonna be productive. And like we still have Keenan Allen's 34. He still put up yard. It's just like, yeah, man. Like I was very much an ageist in Dynasty when I first started. I was like, oh, I don't want these guys over 26. What the hell? Right. And realistically, like with these rookies, it's the exceptions. Like the Bijan Robinson, the Jahmyr Gibbs, they're exceptions. Even like year 1, Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't great. Yeah. Like it's very hard for these guys to come in and be truly elite difference makers off the ground. So you have to, when you buy these really young promising players, you have to give them a year. It's not always going to be Brian Thomas Jr. You're going to get stuff like Marvin Harrison or, like players that will let you down. It was fine. He put up 800 plus yards, but like you weren't starting Marvin Harrison last month of the year. Like nobody was. So it's just, you have to be okay with kind of knowing what you're buying. And I think once we kind of realize that and adjust, like you become so much better at Dynasty understanding that. Like there's windows, there's buy windows, there's sell windows when your team's contending, when to make these moves. And if you can do it right, this is how you, instead of having a 2-year window of winning in Dynasty, you turn it into a 5-6 year window in Dynasty because you're continuously shuffling, rebuilding, and doing these things. So it's just all about knowing that and not going hard line and be like, oh, I hate running backs forever. Like that's not the way to do it, right? It's just
Speaking of sell windows, talk about that real quick on what you learned. You let's say don't know, what your team is in the first 4 weeks, right? As far as like if you're a contender or not, right? You can have an idea based on your roster and who you're competing, but anything can happen, right? You could have Nico Collins, for example, great, phenomenal. He went down and now you're screwed, right? But then maybe you have Courtland Sutton who comes out and does great things, mid-season. Now you're like, oh, okay, I'm containing again. But you had to know when to sell. And I say this because we talked about Jordan Mason earlier. First 4 weeks, Jordan Mason was RB5, RB11, RB24, RB5. And then he went down to nothing less than his best week after that was RB30 in week 7 against KC. That was 58 yards rushing. I say that because in one of my leagues, one guy had Jordan Mason, and it was just like the way your roster is constructed, bro. You don't have it. You're not competing. I get Jordan Mason's 25. I get he's 2 years pro. I get he could be the future of San Fran, all this kind of stuff. But again, this is already knowing the potential of this RB class. This is already knowing CMC can come back. This is knowing they have Garondo. There's a lot of factors knowing Mason isn't going to be their guy, regardless of what happens. So my point is there, this guy didn't trade Mason. Mason ended up on his IR at the end of the season. He had an opportunity to potentially get a first-round pick for Mason early on, 2 people that were trying to contend because of how hot he was. You have to know when to sell out on these guys. Did I sell Brian Thomas Jr. way too early? Sure. But I got some good value out of it, right? And I feel I sold him at the high point because I don't know if he's ever going to get higher in value than what he is right now because he's a rookie and he looks so phenomenal. And next year, they can have a new game plan. Maybe they have a new coach. And guess what? They had to add a new receiver because it's not Kirk or Gabe Davis. So there's a lot of situations. I think you brought that up to me, Jesse, when I was talking about should I trade Thomas Jr. And you actually said, hey, this is a potential that they added their wide receiver. But it's just know when to sell these guys.
Yeah.
You have an idea if you're not contending early on. Look at it, maybe not just, but look at your other rosters. Look at the other teams and be
Yes.
like,
Know where you stand.
when it comes to if my team is fully healthy, can I beat this fully healthy team? If the answer is
Right.
no, guys like Jordan Mason that are going off that you don't see that future for him, go out there and sell these guys because they're holding you, they're clogging your roster. When instead, he has value now, but what has value right now as far as the end of the season? Your draft picks. And this guy he has a third round pick, like that's his earliest pick. So it's like you know where it is because now you'll be lucky to get a fourth round pick for Jordan Mason. I feel like. Where if you trade him in those first 4 weeks, you had that first, and guess what? That first, shit, you can go out there and get T. Higgins for a first. So know those values, know when to trade those booms. Sutton, I like him, but at the same time, like we know they have a younger wide receiver core. We know Sutton is their touchdown guy. We've seen Sutton have some good years. We've also seen him get injured. He's still been trying to flip Sutton for at least a second rate. There's guys every point of the season where it's like, hey, is their value the highest it's gonna be for them, at least for this season? It may not be career, but maybe for this season, is their value the highest it's going to be? If so, and you don't feel down the stretch you're contending, go out there and make the move because guess what? If you trade Jordan Mason for a first, and then guess what? Maybe traded a first for Josh Jacobs, now he's contending. Now he's a different team because now he has someone that's consistent. He knows he's doing it rather than holding this guy that's in a good system, but we know he's not the guy moving forward. So know where your value is at times. And I'm not saying sell everyone with that at the highest, but it is good to know, all right, do these guys have a future on their team? If the answer is no, they shouldn't have a future on mine. So I just try to pivot off of them.
Yeah, like the type of team you're talking about is they're continually buying assets at the wrong time, and they're also paying when they can't really afford to do it. Pay to do it, and it really puts them in a bind, and it leaves you with just this barren dynasty roster. You're looking at it, you're like, oh, this is abysmal. Too many people do that. If that's a lot of the redraft mindset that sleeps in the dynasty, that redraft managers have to be very careful of what they are doing, right? Because they'll be trading first. Like, say you trade a first for, like Jalen Waddle, right? Like, that's a fine buy long term. It'll work out for you. But, like, if you're trying to be contending team and you do that, Waddle is a disaster this year. Like, he's been the worst player you could possibly take in the draft. So if you have him, you have these couple other pieces. Mason goes down. You don't have Mason. All of a sudden, you're looking at your roster like, dude, what do I do here? I'm kind of stuck. And then, to kind of flip that, like, you said it's bad to sell high on like all the time. Like, yeah, it can be, but like you could also continually churn. I think you need to know what you're selling for too. Like, you continually sell just for draft picks. Yes, you're never going to be like in contending win mode unless you have these stockpile of players that you like the core work around there. But like you could do it, like for instance, CJ Stroud, right? People are talking about him as QB1 overall in Dynasty at the end of last year. He had a disaster of a season, right? So you could have sold at that point in time because I was like, dude, we're talking about Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, like even Patrick Mahomes. Like, we know what those guys are, and I think there's risk with Stroud. And it's like, if you moved off of him at that point in time, he's fine asset right now. I think he's 2B7 in Dynasty, so he's still in that kind of fringe. But you could have sold him for like Justin Herbert plus. You know what I'm saying? Type of deal. Like you could have, if you took away kind of the bias we have, and this was me with McCaffrey instead of moving on from him. Now I'm holding him McCaffrey in my home league, which my home league, by the way, like is the one I care about the most. So I don't always focus on my own rules. So I'm kind of talking outside my mouth with this one, right? So it's like other leagues, I'm like, I don't care about these ones as much. Like I'll move players. In my home league, I'm like, fuck, I don't want to move them, right? You know what I'm saying? So I have more attachment to that league, so it's harder. But yeah, like you have to know the right times to sell. And like the point with Mason, like unless you were a certified contender, top 2-3 team, everyone should have been selling Mason. Because what's the point of finishing sixth? Like you're like, I know you won 2 leagues like that, but it's really hard to do that. Like I think something like less than 5% of teams win if they're succeed. Like it's just so hard to do.
And even then, I mean, not to throw shade on this guy, I mean, he hasn't been to the playoffs. So it's like, and I was trying to tell him, like, I went into his DMs, it was like, dude, sell Jordan Mason, bro. Like, I don't have a first, but guess what? If I did, I'd offer that to you. But then he even said, nah, man, his value is worth more. And I'm like, but you're not going to get
not going to get
right. And a lot of players in this league, specifically one of my home leagues, people talk about, oh, this guy's worth 2 firsts, this guy's worth this or 3 firsts, whatever it may be. That's your value, sure.
Yeah.
But are you getting that? Because a lot of people hold on to that to say, hey, this guy is worth this to me, sure. But are you getting that? Like, are you like you mentioned earlier how you said you tried to ask for a second earlier on top of a
Hmm.
first and a player, I
Nico.
believe,
Yep.
Nico, which is okay. But at the same time, like on the flip side, if you're asking for two first and the person's willing to say, "Look, I'll give you a first, second, and third," why not take that? Like, what's the difference between that? Because if you're smart, you can also flip that second and third plus a player for first two if you want, right?
If you're
So it's
thinking
like,
about it.
and I feel a lot of managers just in general don't necessarily think like that. We have to think when we're playing fantasy football in a sense it's chess. Don't think about the move you're making at hand. Think about, okay, if I make this move and it doesn't work out, can I pivot off of this pick or player or whoever I got in this trade to make it work even further, to build on further, right? And I think
Mhm.
I said earlier, we want to win now, but if you're not contending, what are you doing to build the championship? Are you just building and building the Empire State Building to the very top of the sky until you can't see anymore and you're not doing anything? Or are you actually building a ladder to get to the top of the mountain and be the best there too? And I feel going back to say, we fall in love with these players. Jordan Mason, phenomenal, looked great early on. But did you fall in love with him now that you're stuck with him and now he has no value? Or did you sell him at the end of week 2 when he had another top 12 week and now you said, okay, I lost to RB5, I lost to RB24, but now look at it. He didn't play a lot of the season, rest on, and
Mhm.
it's like, okay, now here we are. So your value, as far as not yours in general, just in general for the fantasy league, your value of your players isn't what the league values it if you're not getting that what you're asking. So if you're saying Jordan Mason's worth two first, but no one in your league is offering you two first, maybe you need to adjust that value and say, okay, Jordan Mason is worth 2 seconds or first plus a third or whatever it may be in that sense, just to get him off your hands, right? Don't overvalue your players. Don't think this, and I say this if you're not competing. If you're competing, I get it. Don't get it wrong. But
Yes.
also know when to pivot off certain players if you're competing. If it's like, hey, this is a guy I can drop to elevate my roster further, why not do that, right? I offered a guy that was competing. He ended up being a 4 seed, but I offered him Baker Mayfield for Drake May in the first, and he
Yeah.
said no. Which, all right, I get it. That's spicy. If he would have done the trade, he would have been in the championship, but it's
Right.
because
That's the
Drake
thing.
May's the younger one, so I get it. I was asking for May in the first, but Mayfield became the better quarterback, right? It may be the long term thing, and I understand that too. And he still has his first, so I get it. But at the same time, I was like, all right, bro, look, I'm trying to help you win, so I
Hmm.
can build up my future too. But then I beat him in the first round of playoffs with Baker Mayfield, right? So it's
Right.
like
100%.
you, not every trade you do is a sexy trade. Let's repeat that. Not every trade you do is a sexy trade, but if you make the right trades, even if they're sexy or not, that could be the trade that helps you win your league. So have to think about that. Not everything's gonna go your way the first week you make the trade, but sometimes you make it, it's like, oh wow, I just made a league winning move, right? So
Percent. Like I think that's yeah. To your point, it is like hindsight is 2020, right? Like everything in hindsight. But like I think when you talked about playing chess, I think someone that people should really pay attention to is the 4D chess guys. And one of the guys that's really good at Dynasty that plays like war and stuff. It's tier down. It's what's the name? It's like Michael. I will Michael is his actual Twitter name. Like they do really good Dynasty content. So if those are users looking how to properly like rebuild stockpile true Dynasty, I think people should go over there. They're excellent at what they do, and they make content that makes a lot of sense. You listen to it, you're like, oh, that theoretically makes sense. But you have to like stop treating these players as like players. You kind of have to step back the emotional connection to them, because if you have the emotional connection to these players, this is what screws you in the end. Where you're like, I talked about McCaffrey, like I didn't want to him. We talk about Stroud being QB1. It's like, I don't like, you know what I mean? Like it's
right,
these lessons we kind of learn where it's like you have to treat them as like assets,
right,
and it sucks, but that's the game we play. So like if you remove the emotional connection, which I know it's hard for people, particularly when you're in one or two leagues and it's like redraft, and that's a whole different discussion. But like, it's really hard to do that,
mm-hmm,
and it's easy for me to say because I'm in like 15 plus dynasty leagues.
mm-hmm.
Like I have so many leagues, I don't really care about the players as brutal as that is, but it just makes it a lot easier to trade. So it's just like that's
There,
that's just it's one learns the things we learn.
one of my big guys was Justin Herbert, right? I said at Oregon State.
Yep.
I drafted Herbert in our startup and I loved him. And I was like, I'm not trading this guy. He's an Oregon Duck. This is my guy. Guy offered me 3 firsts for him. And I would say like, yo, he's like 5 first, right? This is he's like QB5 that rookie year and stuff. But that, like, I'm not gonna not take that. Like, I was like, hell yeah, bro, I'll take that all day, right? And it was with Matt Stafford on top of that. But it's like, what you're saying is, I was emotionally attached to Herbert, but I was like, I'm not gonna pass up on that value for a guy that's, as much as I could still cheer for him, but I'm just not. He's not winning me the ship, right? But he's first. I could pivot away and make the right moves, and then get the championship again, right? So, if the value's there, man, yeah, you gotta make the moves. And I'm someone that says the full circle, right? I believe in full circle. So a lot of guys I trade away, and when the times come, sometimes I may even buy higher than what I trade for, right? If the time comes, right? Because it's like, I trade away for this. I no longer lead this though, so I'll go back and get this player because I know he's balling out. And guess what? I'll pay a little bit extra for him because when I had him, it wasn't working out, but now it is. So now I'm gonna go get him. So sometimes you have to do that circle too.
Yeah, I think that's also the other thing on top of it, right? Like, it's okay to buy high at certain times if you believe in the player, but the player better be insulated and it better be an elite producer, because if you're buying high on these players that are not, like, I know we love these young wide receivers, but like if it's Jalen Waddle, you buy high on Jalen Waddle, like I talked about buying him earlier. It's like a first is one thing, but if you pay 2 firsts for him, you're looking back at that trade and you're just like hating life, right? So you have to be very careful with what you're doing. Have a process go in. And I know we're rambling on a little bit here as we're going over an hour, but anybody that wants kind of the tenets of the way I play Dynasty, I can happily send you those if that helps you. That's what it's all about. So yeah, I think we've covered quite a few things. Is there anything else you want to cover before we get on out of here for this year?
No, man. Last episode of the new year, or of the 2024 year for FFU. Stay tuned for our X Blue Sky threads everywhere for our invitation to the Fantasy Football Universal Awards Show. We're gonna recap, some certain awards: QB of the Year, our MVP, Bust of the Year, Waiver Wire Pick of the Year, different award shows that we're doing with all our guys on who we thought was that fantasy person specifically. So stay tuned for that when we're gonna drop that episode and come out to speak to y'all about, hey, these are the guys that were awesome in 2024, not so good, but Fantasy Football Universal Awards Show coming soon.
100%. Like, it's gonna be a fun one, and we're gonna make it a little bit more entertaining and interesting than our traditional content. I mean, I think our content is very interesting and entertaining, but this one's gonna be more fun, Mary. Talk about 2025, what we're looking forward to. So for that, we're gonna get out of here. We're at 70 minutes. I think we've talked enough about this today. So for those of you, we just want to wish you a happy New Year. Hope you enjoy your holiday. Stay safe. Don't get too wild out there. But those of you that did go wild, make sure you have a driver. All that fun stuff. Nobody wants to get in trouble on this day. So for SC, for myself, for Aaron and Jeremy, who's out in Amsterdam already celebrating, I think it's almost New Year there for him. We are the FFU, and we will see you probably on Thursday. Listen up.